friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 9 of my 2022 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be using Lawn Fawn's Beachy Christmas stamp set. So I've stamped those images out on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with Santa's skin, and for that I'm using E00 and E11. There's very little showing, so there's not a lot to color there. Just a little shadow up under his hat brim and on the underside of his arms and inside of his feet, and then blending out with the E00. And then I'm going to use E40 and E41 to add a little bit of shading to his beard and mustache. So I used the E41 first and then blended that out with the E40 just so it could be kind of like a soft, creamy white. I'm going to add in E42 to darken up that combo just slightly and use that to color in my conch shell, just tracing the edges of the various sections with the E42 and then blending out with the E41. And I didn't bother with the E40, I just let that fade into white. And then I did the same thing for the other shell toward the top, the more Nautilus looking shell. And then I'm also going to do some white Christmas bulbs, both on the palm tree and also on the little sandcastle, which I think is such a cute touch to have that image with the little lights strung around it. So I also just added it to the center stripe on the Christmas ornament over toward the left. And then I'm going to change things up to a red combo. I'm using R24, R29, and R39. I really like this combo for Christmas. I think it does make a really nice Christmassy red with that R39 adding that bit of depth in there, and then the R29 and R24 giving that brightness that just lift the combo up. So I'm going to do Santa's hat, of course, and then I also am going to do the little flowers on his Hawaiian shirt so that they look like poinsettias. And I put the darkness in the center and then blended out toward the edges of the petals. I'm also going to hop around and do a bunch of the accessory images since red is one of the traditional Christmas colors. So I'm doing more of the light bulbs on the palm tree. I just use the darkest 2 shades for those. And then I'll also do the top stripe on the ornament. And it got a little bit away from me there, kind of bled down into the middle stripe. So I am going to have to grab my Colorless Blender and try to push that back. It is going to take a little while and a few tries because red just is notorious for bleeding, so it's one of the trickier colors to push out of the way, but I did manage to do it eventually. So I'm going to also do some of the lights on the castle, and I'm going to do the bow on the pineapple and also the bow on the conch shell, just kind of hopping around and adding it to different items here and there. I'm adding it to the center of the bow on the pineapple since it's really facing forward, but then down toward the bottom of the bow on the conch shell since it's where that fabric is gathered as we're seeing it from the side view. I'm also going to color in the shovel for the little sand pail. I'm going to stick to a very traditional color palette for this scene. Most of the accessory images are going to be either red or green. And then I'm also going to do every other stripe on my little candy cane that's sticking out of the coconut drink. I'll move on to my palm tree trunk, and for that I'm using E33, E35, and E37. I wanted something that was a little bit warmer so it would contrast with the coconuts. So that's why I went with these E30s, and I put a little shading with that E37 heavier down the left hand side since it's going on the left hand side of the card, but also a little bit on the right hand side since it's bent over toward the right, so it would kind of have a shadow cast there as well. And then I blended that out with the E35. and I'm filling in the center with the E33. Just taking that all the way down and making sure to catch the edge of the E35 so I get a nice smooth blend there. And then for the coconuts, like I said, I wanted them to contrast, so I went with more desaturated shades using the E40s. I used E43, E44, and E47, and I'm going to do all three of the coconuts plus the coconut drink. So I just put my shading on the right hand side for each of those since the tree is bending that way, and then blend it out with the E44. And then I'll fill in the highlighted area at the top left with the E43. Again, just making sure to catch the edge of that E44 so I get a nice smooth blend and there aren't any harsh lines left behind. For the palm fronds, I wanted something that was fresh but also had some depth to it. So I decided to mix YG13 and YG17 with G46. So 2 from the yellow-green family and 1 from the green family, just to add that more traditional Christmas green in the mix. So I started with the G46 and I'm coloring from the top to the bottom, coming down with the YG17 as the midtone. And then on the soft part of the leaf, the part that's kind of tattered a bit, that's where I want to use the YG13 and just fill all of that in. So like I said, we've got that kind of range from that traditional darker Christmas green to the brighter, fresher, kind of leafy shade. And I'm going to use the same shades for the pineapple, except I'm just going to jump from the G46 to the YG13 since it's a very small area there to color. I'll also do the little umbrella that's sticking out of the coconut drink, and then I'm going to switch up this green combo to G14, G19, and G29, and I'm going to do the bottom part of the ornament and a few more of the light bulbs using that G29, and then blending across with the G19, and wherever possible saving some room for that G14 to kind of brighten up that combo as well. And then I'm also going to do the sand pail with this combo, and I'm putting my shadow on the left hand side since this is another image that's going on the left hand side of the card, and just blending across from darkest to lightest over toward the right. I went back and forth on how to color Santa's shirt and shorts, but eventually decided to go ahead and give him some Christmas green little trunks there. And then I'm going to do his Hawaiian shirt to be white. So I'm going to use some toner grays to add a bit of shading to those. I'm using T0, T1, and T3. And I'm going to do the white parts of his hat, the brim, and the little pom-pom. And then also give him a shirt to match. So using that T3 for a little shading. I'm also going to use it for the top of the ornament there to give it more of like a metallic sheen. And then blending out with the T1, but still sticking close to the edges because I don't want those areas to look gray. I want them to still look white. And then I'll blend out with that T0, but still leave a lot of white space. I'll also add a little T0 to the white stripes on the candy cane, and then use the T3 for that little circle on the bucket. And then I'm going to move on to my pineapple. I wanted to go for kind of like a realistic pineapple look, so kind of goldeny brown yellow toned. I ended up going with Y21, Y26, and Y28, which I think is a pretty close combo for that. Then I'm going to switch to E50, E51, E53, and E55 for my sandcastle, starting with the E55, adding in some shadow on the left side of the right turret and the right side of the left turret, and then both sides of the section in the back. So it would be cast in shadow from both of those. Also filling in all of the little windows with that E55, and then starting to blend that out with the E53. Just working my way carefully around those little light bulbs since they're already colored in. I don't want to smear anything or accidentally color in the white ones so that they're brown. So just continuing my way down using that E51, and then finally a little E50 for the highlight on the outside edges. And then I'm going back to my sun. I was going back and forth, but I decided to pull in some of the colors from the pineapple because I didn't want it to be too bright and kind of stand out too much away from the pineapple. So I ended up using the Y21 and Y26 again, but to give it a little more brightness, because it is the sun, I added in Y11 as well. And then I'm just going to do some rosy cheeks on Santa because he's got to look jolly. So I used R20 and R11. Also added a little R11 to the inner part of the conch shell. And then I'm going to trim these images out with their matching dies. To build my background, I'm taking 2 pieces of Bristol smooth surface cardstock. On one of them, I'm going to use one of the Lawn Fawn Simple Stitch Hillside Borders. And then I'm going to take one of the Stitched Simple Wavy Borders. I'm just figuring out the placement using the same one, but then shifting it over to the one on the left. Then I'm going to take one of the Stitched Hillside Borders and die cut another kind of sand dune out of the panel that has the waves on it because I didn't need that full length. It was going to be hidden behind the other hill anyway. And then the top part above the hill I'm going to save for the sky. So I have my 2 sand dunes here, and I'm going to start to add some color using some Distress Oxide inks, starting with Antique Linen. So I'm blending that down from the top edge where the stitch detail is and taking that down maybe halfway on each panel. And then I'm going to bring in Gathered Twigs, and I'm going to start to bring that up from the bottom. I'm going to take it up more than halfway on the larger panel because I want you to see some of that darker shadow once the bottom panel is layered over top of this one. So I'm going to deepen that up and then go back and forth between my 2 ink blending foams until everything is kind of nicely blended. It doesn't have to be perfect because I'm going to do some splatter over top, but I want it to be a pretty nice blend there. And then I'm going to do about halfway up the bottom one and then again go back and forth to make sure that's nicely blended. And then I'm going to check and make sure that there's enough of that darker background showing. I'm going to deepen up the bottom of the shorter one because that's the one that's going to be in front. So I just wanted there to be a lot of contrast there. And then I'm going to do my splatter like I said. So I'm going to press some of both of these inks onto an acrylic block. I'm going to start with the Antique Linen. I like using the lighter ink for splatter as well because in the darker sections of those panels, it really shows up and adds something. So I'm going to just tap the paintbrush off the edge of that after I've added some water to thin that down. And then we'll get that little bit of splatter detail, which I really do think the light shades mixed in helps it to look like sand. And then I'll do the same thing with the Gathered Twigs, so I have the darker flecks in there as well on both panels. And then to make it look even more like sand, I wanted to add a bit of metallic shimmer. So I'm using a gold shade from my Gansai Tambi Starry Colors. So we get those little bits of, you know, the reflected light from those little tiny dots all over the panel. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to set these two aside to dry, clean up my mini media mat, and then I'm going to move on to the sky section, and I'm going to blend on some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink. This time I'm not making sure to blend really well because I kind of wanted it to look like a cloudy sky. So I left parts of it white, and I also made sure that some areas had more color than others, and kind of just deepened up the top edge as well to give that more definition. I'm not going to do any splatter on the sky today, just on the sand. And then my last panel is the sea. So I'm going to start with the Salvage Patina, bringing that in from the top edge, just like I did with the sand. But then I wanted to darken that up quite a bit. So I'm going to bring in some peacock feathers next, and I'll add that in from the top as well. I decided that I wanted the top of the ocean to be darker than the bottom. I think it looks good either way, but I just decided to do it at the top today, closer to the sky, so that it would be more different, you know, since I used that Salvage Patina on both. So it would be just standing out. And then I use Salty Ocean as my last shade, just a little bit of that at the top, and then working back and forth between those ink blending foams once again to make sure that that part is smooth, because I'm not going to do any splatter on that either. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to move on to my sentiment. And I'm going to stamp that in some lobster ink, and I'm using the sentiment from the Beachy Christmas that says Merry Beachy Christmas. And that's actually stamped pretty good the first time, so I just left it, and then I'm using a peacock card base with peacock ink. So I am stamping Santa again, plus the surfboard, and then the season's greetings sentiment. There's a couple different ones to choose from, but I just decided to go with this one for today. And now I'm ready to start assembling. So I'm going to build this scene starting from the top using the sky portion and just fitting that on my card front. It is a standard A2 size card, so it is 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall. And then I'm going to add the sea next. And then I'll take my taller of the sand dunes and add that, just fitting that to the bottom of the card and making sure that everything is lining up nicely. And then I'll add my final sand dune right over top at the bottom. Once I have everything in place, I can bring in my images and I can start to stage the scene. I also did die cut 2 clouds from spring showers. I actually did 3 clouds using 2 of the dies. I used the middle cloud to die cut 1 and then the smaller cloud to die cut 2. So I'm going to start at the top once again with my sun and add 1 of the small clouds down below it, kind of hiding it a little bit just to kind of integrate that into the scene. And then I'll add my medium-sized cloud over toward the right-hand side, and then the other small cloud even more toward the right, just shift it a little bit below it. Next, I'll take the palm tree and just make sure that I have it right where I want it, and then I'm going to add my liquid glue to the back and adhere that down into place. I wanted that toward the top of the higher sand dune over toward the left side of the card. And then I wanted to add the Christmas ornament hanging down also on the left hand side there. Next, I'll grab Santa out and also just add a few more images around him to make sure of the placement. Because the glue that I'm using dries very quickly, I always like to lay out my images first and just make sure, because it's very hard to shift them once they start to adhere. So Santa's going to go front and center on that top sand dune, and I'm going to give him that little coconut drink to have. He is relaxing on the day after Christmas, and he deserves to kick back and have a nice drink and open some little gifts of his own. So before I adhere any of the elements to the bottom sand dune, I want to add my sentiment so I know how much space that's going to take up. I just trim that down with one of the everyday sentiment banners, and then I'm going to add the little sand castle over to the right hand side on that bottom sand dune. And then on the left, I'll have the sand pail and the shovel as well. I'm going to lay this shovel on its side a bit. And then I have my final two elements, the seashells. I have this smaller one and also the conch that's got the little bow on it. So I'm just figuring out where I want them to go. If I wanted the conch over by the sandcastle, but I decided I preferred the gifts piled under the tree as it just kind of goes with the whole Christmas theme. So that's what I did, and then I put that final little shell over on the left hand side. I felt like there was some empty space though in the ocean part, especially over on the right. So I stamped and die cut the two seagulls from Life is Good, and I'm using my EK Success reverse tweezers to help me lay those down because they are pretty thin. So I put the larger one kind of overlapping the top of the waves, and then the smaller one is going to go up in the sky between the clouds. And I think that finished off the card really nicely. So I'm going to just add a little bit of glitter as my final embellishment. I'm going to put some in the sun, just making sure it doesn't cover the black lines because then it kind of gets a little hazy there. And then I'll also add it to the left side of the ornament and to all of my light bulbs, to the bows on the pineapple and the conch shell, the light bulbs on the sandcastle, and the umbrella on Santa's drink. I put a little bit on the seashell, and then I also decided to add it to the whites of Santa's hat and to the centers of his little poinsettias on his Hawaiian shirt. So lots of glitter on this one, but I think that's always appropriate for Christmas. You can never have too much glitter. I don't know, I just love this concept of Santa being on vacation and getting to kick back the day after Christmas after a job well done and just relax and enjoy himself. So I'm going to lift that up to the camera and give you a look at all of that sparkle and shine between the metallic watercolors and the Stardust stickles. And then there's another peek at the inside as well. If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. I have so many more in this series to come, so you don't want to miss any. All of the products that I use will be listed and linked for you in the description bar below in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is day 9 of the previous 2 years of Holiday Card Series. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I'll see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.